Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Weir. I'm the senior partner of KPMG in Hong Kong, and it's a great pleasure to introduce our speaker at lunch today. I'd just like to thank AmCham and particularly Peter and Richard for a truly wonderful morning. I think many of us go to many conferences, and this truly was a remarkable conference. Some wonderful panels, some wonderful discussion, and we've been supporting this event for 3 years, and it just gets better and better. So thank you very much. It really is my privilege to welcome our lunchtime speaker, Mr. Gordon Orr, who's a very respected senior member of the business community in Hong Kong and China. It also gives me great pleasure as a British person here today to introduce a fellow British speaker. And I want to give comfort to AmCham that this is not the new normal. I'm sure it will never happen again. Gordon was educated in Oxford and at Harvard, and he led McKinsey in Asia as chairman from 2009 and stepped down recently. So Gordon is recently retired, and we look forward to hearing about his plans. Gordon is a very experienced China hand. We heard last night about how he went up to Beijing in the early 1990s and signed the first agreement to launch McKinsey's in Beijing and led the Greater China practice for the best part of 20 years. In that time, he worked with many of the leading Chinese SOEs, POEs, and many multinationals in the key areas of strategy, organization, and international cooperation. So you can imagine over that period, as those companies developed, as China developed, and as China's role in the world developed, Gordon really has become a real reservoir of knowledge about China. Gordon also served on the global board of McKinsey since 2003, with responsibility for Asia, governance, and risk, to which I think we would say, is that all, Gordon? Those are 3 very, very big areas. Gordon is also very well known as a commentator. If you go on the website of McKinsey's or you look at Twitter, Gordon has his own commentary, and it's called Gordon's View. So we're very lucky today, ladies and gentlemen, to have Gordon's View in person. And without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Gordon Orr. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, AmCham. Delighted to be here. My wife would claim I'm at least 5% American at this point, given that she's from Omaha, Nebraska. And we do go there once a year, and it's very exciting. You heard me say it, okay? Very exciting. We heard a lot about the challenges. We've all read the newspapers. Is it enough to throw China onto a fundamentally new path? I think as we go into September and leave August behind, I think we can reflect a little more soberly that we've had currency adjustments of this kind of scale in the past. We've had volume. We've had what's going on with Chinese exports in terms of volume maps the rest of the world. I think we can claim it's the rest of the world's problem as much as China's. The capital outflows have been larger as a percentage of GDP, much larger in the past. Housing sales are rising, retail sales keep rising. And then my own personal, we'd asked the panel about personal metrics. My personal metric for a stock market crash in Greater China being significant is basically how many McKinsey colleagues come into my office and say, actually, I've gone bankrupt as a result of investing in the stock market. And in 1997, there were quite a lot. In 2007, there were quite a lot. This time, there's been 0. So it's not a bad crash yet. So what I wanted to spend a little time on, and I will avoid as best I can retreading the comments that were made earlier. It's the risk of coming last. Talk a little bit about the direction of travel and some of the key trends, implications for companies of all stripes, state-owned enterprises, private enterprises in China, multinationals, and then close on one or two things that I think we haven't perhaps fully touched on that could lead to discontinuities. In terms of the trend, I do want to I think that the strength of the consumer in China is something quite special right now. They feel secure in their jobs. Consumer confidence is closer to 110 than 100 in most of the surveys. Consumption growth is higher in Q2 than Q1. Feeling confident because their real disposable incomes are still rising, up 8% or so far this year. Spending's risen faster. And yet there's such a long way to go, as Victor and others would say. Consumption's still less than 40% of GDP, and I don't think would say it's got to a stable setting point until we get to maybe certainly well over 50. So there's a long way to go. One of the things that we see is pushing people towards more consumption is the fact that so many households own their own home at this point and own it outright. 80% of households in many cities own their own home. A lot of those households, perhaps as much as 20%, own a second property. They're not going to be buying tons more to have a third and the like. Penetration of cars is about 0.6, 0.7 cars per household in first and second tier cities. People own a home. People own a car. They own the big, lumpy capital expenditure things in a personal life. And they got lousy investment options. So the pressure, the feeling is that I have this money, why don't I spend a little more of it? And the generation that are coming through in 25 to 35 has much less propensity to save. They feel much less need to save than previous generations. They have maybe 10% of their wealth on average. For that generation, I think actually quite a lot less on average as we looked at it. They've got maybe $9 trillion, if you take the JP Morgan numbers. They're going to spend more of it. And they're going to spend more of it, to my second point, on services. But I want to amplify what's been wrong with services in China and why I think we could, in many service sectors, we actually could get the potential for a discontinuity of very, very rapid growth for a period of time. And it hasn't been doing badly. To go from 46% of GDP to over 50% in just 2 years, from 2013 to this year, is an incredibly rapid shift in the mix of the economy. Employment in services is growing 5 to 6%, which we should be very grateful about. Maybe the quality of jobs isn't fantastic. We'll come back to that. But there's a lot that's going right. Investment in education services up 30%. Investment in entertainment up 11%. As we heard in the service breakout, nearly 2/3 of FDI coming into China now is going into services. But it could be growing so much faster. There's many parts of the economy that just doesn't have access to services. The service sector in that area doesn't exist. Elderly care, credit services to SMEs, local healthcare options, all of which could readily be addressed through investment, through technology. And by the way, copying is just fine here. We don't need innovation. We just need to come up to best practice. Second problem has been just that the cheaper is better mindset has stayed in services for way too long, leading to poor quality of services that consumers, particularly middle-class Chinese consumers, just say, I don't want to buy this. This is too bad. And particularly those 100 million who travel internationally and experience better quality services saying, I'll buy it, but I'll buy it when it's in good shape. So I'm very hopeful, got my fingers crossed that, take the theme park segment in China, that the opening of Disney in Shanghai next year will really lead to a transformation of the quality of services in that sector, attracting not just millions of people to Disney, but to other theme parks and the like, creating, you could get a 20-30% growth rate in that sector for 2 or 3 years as people raise the quality, it attracts more people, and it becomes a virtuous cycle. And then there's just the inefficiency and therefore high cost of many services. On the B2B side, again, we heard in the breakout around, logistics is 18% of GDP in China versus 7% in the US. The government set a goal for improving that, but a goal to get to 16%. There's so much further that could be done through better application of technology, larger scale companies, getting rid of the regulatory constraints that hold back the development of that sector. Internet innovated services help tremendously. But let me just finish the service with just one example of what happens when you get it right. Take cinemas, the cinema sector in China. 1,000 new screens in each of the last couple of years. It's a great physical product. The movies themselves, a pretty good product. People pay 15, even 20 US dollars to go watch an IMAX 3D. Year to date, revenues in Chinese cinemas are up 48%. Tickets are up 45%. When you unleash the potential of quality services to the Chinese consumer, the money to pay is there, the willingness to pay is there, and the recognition of quality is worth paying for is there. So I'm very excited that we can get some real upticks there. And then at the other end of the spectrum, those of you who've read my stuff know what I have a thing about soccer. Is that soccer as a business in China is completely the other end of the spectrum. The product is terrible, the sport is terrible, the season ticket's $100, and that's overpriced. So please bring Manchester City, have them buy Shanghai, and then we can work on that. Digital enablement, digital empowerment is a third theme driving through. We've heard a lot about that. I do think, and I'll come back to this, just the one point I want to make here, is the impact on jobs has not played through yet. I think the impact on jobs of digital enablement, digital empowerment at pace, the disruption in the financial sector, retail sector, and manufacturing is going to be massive in the next couple of years, and we're going to have to think about that. The theme of efficiency in operations, capital substituting for labor. We've seen this, and if I personalize it, the switch in the nature of kind of questions, topics, issues that McKinsey get asked to address by particularly Chinese private companies over the last 2 to 3 years. Almost everything is now about domestically, it's now focused on efficiency. How do I get more out of what I have? How do I use my capital more efficiency? Even sometimes with state-owned enterprises, doing an energy efficiency improvement project with a state-owned enterprise would not be something I thought I could stand up here and tell you we were doing, but it is something that's happening today. It is driving much greater separation of winners and losers. The muddle through middle is really, really disappearing, I think. And as people come out of the land grab phase, and they're number 1, 2, 3 in China, they're realizing that differentiation through excellence in execution, that having a chief marketing officer, a head of supply chain, a CIO, and giving them some real meaningful responsibility, not having everyone in little business unit silos, is really changing the game. And the demand for functional excellence that doesn't exist inside in many of these companies, and the need, therefore, to think about outsourcing is starting to change the game. Property, I think, as we see it, and one of the interesting sectors that's actually become one of the more important practices over the last 3 or 4 years has been the Chinese property developers. We do see underlying momentum improving. We're seeing a flight to quality. a flight to quality in terms of developer, and a flight to quality in terms of location within cities. And the Tianjin incident, I think, is only going to make that more significant. The imbalance at a national level between housing starts and housing sales is reducing the inventory. But again, it's imbalanced across the country. We're seeing a flight towards top-tier cities, flight perhaps too strong a word, and in many of these third and fourth-tier cities, buildings will become slums and fall down before anyone moves into them. And then a final theme is that the cost of running China, if you're the government, is just going up and up and up. And I think it's slightly underappreciated, how much the government is going to have to spend on its own operation. It's been historically able to underpay people in almost all, whether it's in state-owned enterprises, whether it's civil servants, whether it's teachers, doctors, and the like. The shortfall in talent willing to come in now is changing that. We're seeing fewer people taking the government entry exams. We're seeing fewer high-talent people taking the government entry exams than we've seen in a decade. And in a society where, on a B2C basis, almost everything is becoming technology-driven, the fact that the government is so paper-dependent still, going to renew my driving license in Shanghai the other day, took about 6 hours of my time seeing multiple people carrying a whole file of paper around with me to do this, rather than the capability existing, if the investment was made, to do it all entirely online. So for a government that's becoming less cash-rich, it's facing pressure to invest in technology to become more productive, invest in people to retain them, invest in people to get them to come join at all in the first place. And I think you will hear more pressures, more concerns about how much it costs to run China going forward. Corporate responses. I think reform, yes. If I'm with the SO state-owned enterprise, and let me talk for a moment about just the national level state-owned enterprises. Three core themes there, and talking from working with a number of them in the very recent past. Anti-corruption, there's clearly a level of anti-corruption fatigue, but a sense that it is not going to go away. For us, it's meant that there's a whole segment of state-owned enterprises that, as McKinsey, we wouldn't try to work with at this point in time, just because their decision-making is non-existent, and they've been challenged in how they've used consultants in the past. So 40 or 50 of your top executives have disappeared or gone away. The tendency to do not, I actually have a lot of sympathy for the leadership in these companies, and I don't think a shift back to a bias for action is going to happen anytime soon, with the exception of two things that are being mandated top-down. The consolidation. I would assert that the consolidation of the national level state-owned enterprises, the 120 down to 40, is going to happen. I think it's going to happen pretty quickly. There's a lot of speed dating going on right now of the slightly weaker companies trying to work out who would be nice to be partnered up with. There's lots. They're getting ahead of SASAC in some of this. There's clearly in shipping, it's announced rail, nuclear, aluminium. There's more coming, and we are going to see that slimming happening coming down. I think central government likes the idea of fewer people that they have to call up. They like the idea of having companies that are of greater scale. They like the idea of more disciplined markets and pricing. If there's only one owner of a port rather than two owners of a port, the likelihood of a price war is relatively low. The third element, though, is then non-core asset disposals. And again, this is getting caught up in the consolidation. Lots of debate around what is a non-core asset right now. who's it appropriate to sell it on to. Most of it, as we see it at the moment, is going to domestic buyers of assets, but again, a lot coming out of that relatively at pace. It's not going to lead to operational efficiencies anytime quickly. May lead to some pricing disciplines, may need some capital efficiency, and a lot of internal focus. So yes, we'll have some zombie companies out there. The dollars won't be withdrawn, and in fact, zombie companies won't be limited to multinationals. Sorry, to state-owned enterprises. Private companies spent most of my time in recent years domestically as they see the slowdown. Diversification, which begs the question often of, does the entrepreneur really understand, were they lucky or were they good? I know what the entrepreneur will answer that question. But how you go from, property companies to agriculture, how you go from media to automotive manufacturing, the range of diversifications is really remarkable, even by Chinese standards. And I think that doesn't really count as the China new normal. I think it gets back to the phrase that we heard a lot 15 years ago of 中国特色, China special situation. Whenever someone's trying to explain something to you that doesn't make necessarily economic sense, it's 中国特色, it's China special situation. But at the top of the pile, and what John and others were, I think, talking about when they were up here early on today, is what I would call the emergence of the Chinese Mittelstand. We all know, the powerhouse of Germany is these mid-size industrial companies that is incredibly good at doing one thing, and they dominate their world market in whatever it is that they do. I see more and more Chinese companies that are really aspiring to achieve that from construction equipment, packaging materials, auto components, they have IP. They're number one or number two in China, and they want to stick to their knitting and go global. And those are the really exciting companies for, I think to be following, to be part of, to be investing with and behind. Actually, speaking of IP, in the service breakout, we talked about the Goldman Sachs Shenzhen financial services company. It reminded me, there was a period when there were lots of fake McKinseys in China. There was actually, the Chongqing government even announced that McKinsey had opened an office in Chongqing without telling us. But as we know, Chongqing did a lot of strange things. No, there were people out there setting up websites, pretending to McKinsey. So, you want a report, it's $100. That ought to have been a warning signal, but... just a good news story related to that. We focused on one of the guys. We made sure he was actually buying copies of our reports to clients from low-level clients, and then trying to resell them. We'd registered our IP, we'd registered the brand. We'd taken legal counsel on what is the disclaimer that has to be on the document. You think that boilerplate doesn't matter? We'd taken legal advice on what the boilerplate on the document was. We went to the Public Security Bureau in the city where this guy was based, and they said, yep, you're right, we'll arrest him, he'll go to jail, and he did. And they gave us even more exciting, they gave us a piece of paper that told us this is what they'd done. So whenever anyone set up a fake McKinsey after that, we just faxed them a piece of paper. It worked. It's good. Other exciting thing in the private sector is just the scale and pace of shift towards startups. 5 years ago, everyone wanted to go join China Mobile, ICBC, Job for Life, security. That's what my parents told me I should do. And now, if you believe the latest surveys, 12% of people coming out of Peking University this year are joining startups, up from like 2, 3. It wasn't hardly even measurable. And you're getting these clusters, particularly around Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing, around flagpole companies of startups and returnees. I think one of the Hong Kong, Shenzhen, really interesting things is returnees to China setting up both in Hong Kong and Shenzhen, doing startups that are essentially born cross-border, and a lot of exciting things that are happening there. Multinationals, we've heard a lot today. I would just say, I think, again, it's all over the place in terms of, just take the automotive sector, where, there's lots of doom and gloom that, demand is going to probably end the year totally flat. If we go up to the, Mercedes guys in Beijing, they're having their best year ever. It's about having the right models, having a fresh lineup, selling well, having quality relationships with the channel. And so I think it's very, very, very hard to generalize. What do I hear is, what a priority industry is going for? Not surprisingly, I think a lot of it comes related to services, B2B services as well as B2C. Logistics, cold storage, IT services. I think we're going to see a whole new wave of outsourcing of IT. Chinese companies still spend relatively, at best, 50% of what their international peers spend on IT. And as they come to scientific marketing using big data, as they come to upgrading their supply chain, as they come to becoming globally complex in what they're doing, the need to upgrade IT, upgrade functional capabilities fast, they're going to have to do it, and they'll do it through outsourcing. Entertainment, broadly defined, for the reasons I highlighted earlier. Education, wealth management on and offshore. And I think, one of the sleeper industries is really the completing the modernization of agriculture from end to end, both domestically and internationally, to feed in a safe and secure fashion the Chinese consumer. So that's a quick run through on some highlights as I see with companies. 2 or 3 risks that I think could lead to a discontinuity. The most important of which I think I would just say is jobs. Jobs. Xi Jinping may or may not be desperately excited about the Chinese economy and whether it grows 7%. I'm absolutely certain he's paranoid about jobs. Li Keqiang still starts most of his speeches by talking about how many new jobs have been created this year. And maybe if you stand back, the last 10, 15 years, 10 years maybe, has been a golden age for being a blue-collar worker, which has been pretty good to be a white-collar worker. Wages pushed up 15% per annum, save enough to buy a property. It's like compressing 1950 to 1980 in the US into 10 years. But we've reached this tipping point now, tipping point of substituting capital for labor. Capital productivity is rising fast, technology enabling new business models. State-owned enterprises on a net basis are not hiring. PMI on recruiting in both services and manufacturing's been below 50. I think the technology impact of what's going to happen to the millions of people who sell insurance door to door, who work in bank branches, who've been pushed off production lines, has really yet to play through. No, but let's be clear. I'm not saying that the stress today, the pain points are not there right now. Officially, 7 million new jobs in the first half of the year. Services clearly picking up most of those. I don't think they're great jobs. Labor demand in urban areas still exceeds supply. Income's still rising. Perhaps a better metric of that is income tax paid is still rising. It's up 20% so far year to date. And then two more personal metrics. Last time there was a big downturn, we, and I'm sure all of you with operations in China, we were visited by local government, politely asked us what were our recruiting plans. That hasn't happened yet. And in 2008, in the big cities, when the construction downturn happened, there was a crime wave of petty theft. That hasn't happened either. So at the macro and the micro metrics, we're not in a problem situation yet, but I really do feel that the pressures are building up, and that in particular, if you're a student, You've seen no rise in nominal starting salary since 2008 if you're coming out of a Chinese university. And if you're a construction worker or a manufacturing worker that's getting displaced, maybe there are subsistence service jobs that you could take on, but they're not really value-added roles. And so that's going to be a challenge that I think, if I had to put my finger on one thing that I'd say pay attention to that. Debt levels, I think we touched on that, so I won't go through that. And then, yes, leadership credibility. Leadership credibility, we've talked on a number of things, so let me just emphasize a couple of slightly different ones. As the jobs discontinuity comes, it's not going to be evenly spread out. We talk about ghost towns that never will be moved into. I'd be more concerned about zombie cities where the industry has died. There are many, many towns and cities in China that are one industry towns: coal mines, steel mills, automotive, textiles. And we've all seen, whether it's in the Midwest of the US, in central Germany, in northwest England, what happens when those industries go into transition. This is going to be a new challenge, and one that I think will stress the credibility not just of local government, but of central government. I mean, we have provinces that are claiming to grow at 2% only today. Within those provinces, there are clearly city-level economies that are already shrinking, and that's not going to turn around. There could also be zombie generations of just classes of individual that don't get the opportunity to participate in the modern economy. Some of these students, some of the former construction workers, and the like. Those, I think, are foreseeable, knowable. Government, I think, understands these challenges as well as better than any of us, but they still have to be addressed, and they're not easy. And then there's just the uncertainty of shocks, and further national health and safety shocks. Government has to deliver on quality of life, further issues on food, pollution, or what I would call now proximity to facilities that are perceived to potentially be unsafe. There's going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who own homes in China now that, at least for the foreseeable future, are fundamentally unsaleable. If you own a property that's seen to be anywhere in the vicinity of an industrial facility, you will not be able to sell it now. At some point, people will ask for some compensation about this. Who they're going to ask for compensation, I'm not sure. It's going to have to be handled. And related to that, there's the property slumification, that much of the property that was built 20 years ago was not built to last 50 or 70 or 100 years. It was built to last 20 or 25. Again, some of that is starting to become unsaleable. If you put your life savings into that and you can't sell it or you can't upgrade, there are some challenges. So I don't really want to finish on the downbeat note. I've spent 20, 22, 23 years from starting with McKinsey with one desk, one telephone, 2 people in China when we had no Chinese colleagues, to a position where the majority of our partners are Chinese. Some of them were actually from the first class of colleagues that we recruited from Beida and Tsinghua when I went to China. And that the strength of talent in China, the adaptability, the way in which it's developed. And yes, we've had high turnover like everyone else, but the talent goes on to be successful wherever. But the talent that we've had and the opportunities that we've had to grow global consultants, global leaders in business as a result of what we've been there, creates a level of optimism that the resilience of the economy, the resilience of society, the resilience of government to identify problems and maybe not act as quickly as we would all like, but act pretty quickly, reflecting the realities and constraints, and to come out the far side with a stronger economy, a stronger society. I have a great belief in that, and I'm going to be staying around here, post McKinsey. Actually, I'm up for any suggestions on what to do, because I have no idea at this point. And I guess cash flow matters at some point. Anyway, let me close by saying thank you very much again. Thank you for inviting me, and I think we'll probably have time for a few questions. Thank you.
Very much. I'm sure
you have
the
David and George show now.
We can do a British sideshow here. But really, I think you have a career as a speaker afterwards. I think there'd be a bit of cash in that for you. Gordon's very kindly agreed to take questions. Whilst people are thinking about a very searching question for Gordon, because it's very important he doesn't have a rest, let me raise one with you. McKinsey have grown very, very fast and have a great story in China. And as you say, you went from a one-man band into this very large organization now. So you're a major employer. You touched on human capital, human resources earlier. But as an employer in China at the moment, what are you seeing? And what are the challenges ahead? Because I think many of the organizations in the room today see human capital as one of the biggest challenges.
Well, I think just accepting that turnover is high. So we've always said we're going to recruit 2 to 3x at the pace for what our anticipated growth. And if everyone stays and is successful, well, that's fantastic. But we've gone through the era of, the first set of people poaching from us was, Goldman Sachs, thank you very much, and the investment banks. Then it was the private equity guys. There was a very short phase of state-owned enterprises, and now it's startups. But again, McKinsey guys going to join an industry is usually a sign that it's peaked. So make your own choice on investing in Chinese internet stocks.
Very hard to follow that. Any questions from the audience? Please state your name and your company, please.
Dan.
Oh, Robin, yes.
You've traveled in these years many places across China, and I just thought I'd ask you, what's the most interesting place you've been recently, and why? And what have you seen? What trend have you seen there that all of us have been sitting around in ballrooms like this and have missed?
I'm not sure I can deliver on the last phrase of what have you missed. I mean, two things. I mean, there was a period of time when I didn't go to Shenzhen very much, and I've been going there a lot recently. I think the way in which it has just become such a center of dynamism and entrepreneurialism around technology, manufacturing, services, internet, and the way it's, as I see it, is leveraging Hong Kong so well. I would just say, I think you have something potentially incredibly special to take advantage of here between Shenzhen and Hong Kong. And maybe if you're in the middle of it, you don't realize quite how special it is. But coming from Shanghai and Beijing, people in those cities are noticing and feeling, maybe there's something down here we should be paying attention to. And then there's a few cities in the northeast that are just really depressing in terms of the, what is it going to take? Is there any way you can turn around? Where would the capital come from to start to make that happen?
It's interesting, this theme of entrepreneurship has been a recurring one this year, and I don't recall it being raised in previous conferences, so it just shows how much it's changing. Yeah. Gordon, just other reflections. Many of the members of AmCham have regional headquarters here and have Asian operations beyond China. Mm-hmm. your reflections after all your years in China, and of course part of your role was international cooperation, the linkages of China businesses in the region. And I think many people are very interested in the Mekong Delta and that leg. Any reflections to share with the audience?
I think certainly many of the Chinese private entrepreneurs they feel they're on a desperate catch-up right now. Really they sort of ignored the international side of things too long. And one of the things that's been drawing more of McKinsey's activities back to Hong Kong is the creation, the shift of international headquarters for Chinese companies here in Hong Kong. And some of them are small, some of them are large, but they are the center of decision making going in a very different direction. And again, I think that's a trend that, as long as the government encourages it, has got a long, long way to go yet. Historically, we've had, I think, a primary focus on Southeast Asia, of sort of selling into Southeast Asia as my backyard to do that. The last 12, 18 months, actually really since Modi won the election, India's gone way up on the agenda. And there's definitely this sense of an emerging business model of, I'm not going to try and build a brand in India. I'm going to find an Indian company. I'm going to let them put their brand on my product, and I'm just going to sell an awful lot in there. It's happened in consumer electronics, but it's happening in a bunch of other B2B sectors as well. I think China to India could be a hidden growth engine coming forward.
Very interesting. Thank you, Gordon. Again, opening up to the floor. Well, I think you must have covered all the subjects in the speech, in your far-reaching speech, Gordon. Yeah. I can see Richard getting slightly twitchy, so we will pass on to Richard. And thank you very much, Gordon, for a wonderful speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do have a